When the enemy stood at the gates of Moscow in 41, it was the Siberians who became the steel wall against which German tank wedges shattered. A harsh land gives birth to special people with an iron character and an unyielding will. Among these heroes, Afanasy Beloborodov holds a special place, a man whose name became a symbol of Siberian resilience and military prowess. A native of the Irkutsk land, he rose from a simple peasant boy to an army commander whose decisions determined the outcome of battles involving tens of thousands of soldiers. His 78th Rifle Division, staffed by Siberians like himself, at a critical moment in the Battle of Moscow, took the brunt of elite German units and did not flinch. This division became one of the first Guards divisions in the Red Army and followed a glorious combat path from the snow-covered fields near Moscow to the ancient walls of Königsberg. Ahead awaits us an amazing story of a man who, in the most difficult moments of the war, found solutions where others saw only hopeless situations. In 1903, in the small village of Afanasy in the Irkutsk Governorate, a boy was born into a peasant family who was destined to become an outstanding military leader. They named him Afanasy. The Beloborodov family lived like most Siberian peasants of that time, in constant toil and struggle against harsh nature. Afanasy's father, Afanasy Beloborodov, was a hard-working man respected among fellow villagers. From a young age, he accustomed his son to labor and responsibility, qualities that would later play a decisive role in shaping the character of the future general. His mother, a simple peasant woman with a strong character, instilled in her son the honesty and straightforwardness so characteristic of Siberians. Afanasy's childhood passed in conditions where every day was a trial. Harsh Siberian winters with biting frosts, when the mercury column dropped below 40 degrees, short but hot summers requiring tireless work in the fields. All this tempered his character, taught him patience and endurance. Already at 10 years old, Afanasy helped his father in all peasant affairs, plowed, mowed, looked after livestock. In the Beloborodov family, children were raised strictly but fairly. The Siberian tempering formed in young Afanasy a special blend of qualities: physical endurance, a sharp mind, the ability to make quick decisions and take responsibility for them. Afanasy learned to read and write in a church parish school where he showed remarkable abilities for learning. However, the turbulent events of the early 20th century made their adjustments to the measured life of the Siberian hinterland. The revolution, and then the Civil War, reached even distant Siberian villages. At 16, when many of his peers were just entering adulthood, Afanasy Beloborodov had already made his choice. In 1919, he voluntarily joined a partisan detachment fighting against the Kolchak forces in the Irkutsk Governorate. This was the first serious test for the young Siberian. In the partisan detachment, Beloborodov quickly distinguished himself among his comrades by his quick wit and courage. Despite his young age, he participated in several serious combat operations against the White Guards. It was during this period that his leadership qualities and ability to make unconventional decisions in difficult situations became apparent. After the defeat of the Kolchak forces and the establishment of Soviet power in Siberia, Beloborodov did not return to peasant labor. He linked his fate with the Red Army, which became for him not just a place of service, but a true calling. Thus began the long journey of the Siberian boy to the heights of military art. Having joined the Red Army in 1923, Afanasy Beloborodov began his ascent to the military elite from the very bottom. The young Red Army soldier spent his first years of service in an infantry regiment, where he quickly caught the attention of his commanders with his discipline and natural ingenuity. The command, noticing his leadership potential, sent the capable Siberian to junior officer courses. This became the first step in his military career. Just a year later, Beloborodov commanded a squad and soon was promoted to assistant platoon commander. His Siberian thoroughness and innate sense of responsibility made him an ideal candidate for further promotion. In 1929, Beloborodov graduated from the infantry school in Irkutsk, receiving his first officer rank. Now, an entire platoon of soldiers was under his command. The young commander enthusiastically undertook the training of his subordinates, applying the principles that would later become the foundation of his command style: demandingness of himself and his subordinates, personal example, and care for his soldiers. In the 1930s, as the army actively modernized, Beloborodov continued his military education. He graduated from the Frunze Military Academy, where he thoroughly studied modern combat tactics, strategy, and the history of military art. Academic knowledge, combined with practical experience and natural intuition, formed his unique command signature. After the academy, Beloborodov's career developed rapidly. Battalion commander, regimental chief of staff, regimental commander. In each position, he proved himself to be a thoughtful, proactive officer, capable of finding unconventional solutions in difficult situations. Beloborodov paid particular attention to combat training. He was convinced that only in conditions as close as possible to real combat could true soldiers be prepared. Exercises in his units always took place in any weather, with full gear, overcoming natural obstacles. This approach hardened the soldiers mentally and physically, which later saved many lives at the front. By the early 1940s, Afanasy Pavlantyevich was already an experienced commander, with service in the Far East behind him, where he participated in repelling Japanese provocations. This experience of confronting a real enemy proved invaluable. In the spring of 1941, when war was already on the threshold, Colonel Beloborodov received an appointment that became the culmination of his pre-war career. He took command of the 78th Rifle Division. The division, which was destined to become a Guards division, was formed in Siberia, and most of the soldiers were Beloborodov's countrymen, strong, resilient Siberians. The new division commander immediately set to work with his characteristic energy. He personally checked the training of each unit, delving into all aspects of the division's life, from combat training to the living conditions of ordinary soldiers. Beloborodov understood that the success in battle depended on the coordinated actions of all units, and resilience in critical moments depended on morale. By June 41, the 78th Rifle Division was one of the best in the Siberian military district. No one knew then that very soon this division would play a key role in a battle whose outcome would determine the fate of the country. The 22nd of June, 1941, forever divided the country's history into quote and one. For the 78th Rifle Division, as for the entire Red Army, a new era began. An era of the severest trials and unparalleled courage. Colonel Beloborodov learned of the war's outbreak while at the division's headquarters in Novosibirsk. The first hours were filled with anxious anticipation of orders, which were not long in coming. Within a day, the division was brought to full combat readiness. Intensive training of personnel began, units were brought up to strength, and weapons were inspected. Beloborodov personally supervised this process, understanding that the lives of the soldiers and the success of future operations depended on the quality of preparation. The division commander demanded full commitment from his subordinates, but he himself worked at the limit of human capabilities. His Siberian temperament allowed him to sleep 3 to 4 hours a day and maintain clarity of thought even in the most difficult situations. In July, the division received reinforcements. These were mainly Siberians, hunters, lumberjacks, miners, collective farmers, strong, resilient, accustomed to hardship. Many of them were excellent marksmen, a skill acquired through hunting, which now had to serve in the fight against the enemy. Beloborodov skillfully used these qualities of his countrymen in forming units. Special attention was paid to sniper groups and reconnaissance. By October 1941, when the situation at the front became critical, the 78th Rifle Division received orders to redeploy to the western direction. German troops were pushing towards Moscow, and all available reserves were being drawn in to defend the capital. Echelons with Siberians moved west, towards decisive battles. Beloborodov used the travel time to conduct classes with commanders, analyze tactical situations, and study the experience of the first months of the war. He understood that his soldiers would have to face an experienced, well-armed enemy, and he strove to prepare them as much as possible for this ordeal. On October 17th, the division disembarked at Volokolamsk station and immediately took up defensive positions in the Volokolamsk direction, where the main blow of German tank columns was expected. Beloborodov received an order from the commander of the 16th Army, General Rokossovsky, to hold positions at all costs and prevent the enemy from breaking through to Moscow. The situation was critical. Fascist troops were only 100 kilometers from the capital, and there was practically nothing to stop them with. It was at this moment that the best qualities of Division Commander Beloborodov manifested themselves. Coolness, the ability to quickly assess the situation and make unconventional decisions. He personally toured all defensive sectors, met with regimental and battalion commanders, and spoke with the soldiers. His calm confidence was transmitted to his subordinates. The Siberians prepared thoroughly for the encounter with the enemy, diligently fortifying positions, camouflaging firing points, and creating a multi-layered defense system. Beloborodov ordered the digging of full-profile trenches, the equipping of dugouts, and the creation of anti-tank obstacles. Special attention was paid to organizing the firing system. Every meter of the defended territory had to be covered by fire. On October 26th, reconnaissance reported the advance of large enemy forces. The battle began, destined to go down in the history of the Great Patriotic War as one of the key episodes of the Battle of Moscow. The Siberians were to hold back the onslaught of elite Wehrmacht units, which had 3 years of victorious war experience in Europe. But Beloborodov believed in his soldiers, in their steadfastness and courage. He knew that behind them was Moscow, which meant there was no retreat. In November 41, the Volokolamsk Highway became the last line of defense on the path of German tank columns to Moscow. The 78th Rifle Division of Colonel Beloborodov took up positions in the area of the villages Petolino, Gusenevo, and Dubosekovo. The division commander understood every meter of land must become a trap for the enemy. He ordered the creation of an echeloned defense with anti-tank ditches, minefields, and camouflaged firing points. The peculiarity of Beloborodov's tactics lay in a system of strong points capable of conducting an all-round defense even when encircled. Each battalion was transformed into an impregnable fortress, saturated with firepower. On November 16th, the Germans threw 2 tank and 1 infantry division at the Siberians' positions. Beloborodov met them with a barrage of artillery fire. He personally adjusted the artillery's actions, moving to forward observation posts. At critical moments of the battle, the division commander appeared among the soldiers, instilling confidence and calm. His signature phrase became, "Particularly fierce battles unfolded near the Dubosekovo railway siding, where 28 Panfilov heroes performed their immortal feat." Beloborodov sent reinforcements and additional anti-tank weapons there. When the Germans broke through the defense in an adjacent sector, the division commander organized a counterattack with a reserve battalion. restoring the situation. On November 18th, the Nazis launched a new massive attack. Under the pressure of superior forces, the division was forced to retreat to a new defensive line. Beloborodov organized this retreat in such a way that the enemy could not develop their success. Every kilometer cost the Germans enormous losses. The division commander used the tactic of, quote, retreating to prepared positions while simultaneously launching counterattacks on the flanks of the advancing enemy. In the 20s of November, the 78th Division engaged in heavy defensive battles in the Istra area. Here, Beloborodov employed a new tactical maneuver, night raids by mobile groups into the enemy's rear. Small detachments of soldiers, armed with submachine guns and grenades, infiltrated the German battle formations and delivered sudden strikes against headquarters, communication nodes, and concentrations of equipment. This disorganized the enemy's command and sowed panic in their ranks. By the end of November, Beloborodov's division, exhausted by continuous fighting but not broken, held the line west of Istra. On November 27th, an order came from the Supreme Commander-in-Chief to transform the 78th Rifle Division into the 9th Guards Division. This was a recognition of the exceptional merits of the Siberians in the defense of Moscow. November 27, 1941, was forever etched into the history of the 78th Rifle Division. On this day, a courier arrived at the staff headquarters with a special package. Colonel Beloborodov, who had just returned from the front line, opened the document and froze for a moment. The order from the Supreme Commander-in-Chief read, "For the steadfastness, courage, and heroism shown in the battles near Moscow, the 78th Rifle Division is to be transformed into the 9th Guards Rifle Division." This was an exceptional recognition of the Siberians' merits. At that time, there were only a few Guards formations in the entire Red Army. To receive such a title in the midst of the most difficult defensive battles, when the outcome of the Battle of Moscow was not yet decided, was a special honor. Beloborodov gathered the regimental commanders and read the order. Silence reigned in the dugout for a few seconds, and then a loud "quote" erupted. The division commander understood that this was not just a change in the division's number, it was a tremendous moral support for the soldiers and, at the same time, a huge responsibility. "Now we are guardsmen," he told the commanders. "This means that a special demand is placed on us. We must be an example for the entire army." News of the division's transformation into a guards division spread like wildfire throughout all units. The soldiers were reanimated. Even exhausted by continuous battles, they felt a surge of new strength. The Guards title was more effective than any rest. Why was Beloborodov's Siberian division honored with such distinction? There were several reasons. Firstly, incredible tenacity in defense. Over 2 weeks of November battles, the division did not allow the enemy to advance more than 25 kilometers, even though elite Wehrmacht tank formations were operating against it. Secondly, the skillful combination of defense with counterattacks. Beloborodov never limited himself to passive defense. Even retreating under the pressure of superior enemy forces, he always sought an opportunity for a counterattack. This wore down the enemy and prevented them from developing their success. Thirdly, minimal losses with maximum operational effectiveness. The division commander conserved his men, skillfully using terrain, camouflage, and the fire system. At the same time, the damage inflicted on the enemy was incomparably greater than their own losses. Fourthly, the high morale of the soldiers. The Siberians fought not just steadfastly, they fought with faith in victory even in the most difficult moments. This attitude spread to neighboring units, strengthening the entire front. Along with the Guards title, the division received new supplies: submachine guns, anti-tank rifles, mortars. Monetary allowances also changed. Guardsmen were entitled to a 50% bonus on their salary. But the most valuable acquisition was the soldiers' new self-awareness. "We are guardsmen." These words sounded like an oath, like an obligation to fight even better, even more selflessly. On December 5, 1941, the Soviet counteroffensive near Moscow began. For the 9th Guards Division, this meant a transition from exhausting defense to decisive offensive actions. Beloborodov gathered the regimental commanders in his dugout on the eve of the offensive. "Tomorrow we go on the offensive," he said, surveying the tired but determined faces of his subordinates. "The enemy is exhausted, but still strong. Our task is not just to push them back, but to crush them without mercy." The division commander developed a plan that took into account the terrain and the condition of the German units. The main blow was delivered to the enemy's flanks, followed by encirclement and annihilation. Special attention was paid to the interaction of infantry with artillery and support tanks. Beloborodov demanded extreme accuracy of fire from the artillerymen to maximally suppress German firing points before the infantry attack. The transition from defense to offense is the most difficult task for any commander. Beloborodov brilliantly coped with it thanks to several tactical maneuvers. Firstly, he created Udarnia assault groups of the most experienced soldiers, armed with submachine guns and grenades. These groups were to rapidly capture key enemy positions. Secondly, the division commander organized a system of rolling barrage, a sequential transfer of artillery fire deep into the enemy's defenses ahead of the advancing infantry. Thirdly, he actively used ski detachments for deep flanking maneuvers and strikes against the rear of German units. On the morning of December 6th, after a powerful artillery preparation, Beloborodov's guardsmen launched the offensive. The Germans, accustomed to seeing only a defending side in the Russians, were stunned by the ferocity and strength of the blow. The villages of Kryukovo and Istra were the first to be liberated. Beloborodov was in the forward lines, personally coordinating the actions of the units. When the Germans tried to counterattack near the village of Lenino, the division commander quickly regrouped his forces and organized a flanking attack, disrupting the enemy's plan. By December 10th, the division had advanced 20 kilometers, liberating more than 10 settlements. The Germans retreated, abandoning equipment and weapons. But it was not a disorderly flight. The enemy fought back, launched counterattacks, and set up ambushes. Beloborodov demanded thorough reconnaissance and constant combat security from regimental and battalion commanders. "Don't get carried away with pursuit. Don't stretch out your combat formations," he instructed his subordinates. Particularly heavy fighting unfolded for the city of Volokholamsk, an important transport hub and a powerful stronghold of the German defense. The Nazis had turned the city into a real fortress, saturating it with firing points and minefields. Beloborodov decided not to storm the city head-on, but to bypass it from the flanks, cutting off the garrison's escape routes. The maneuver succeeded. The Germans, fearing encirclement, were forced to abandon the city. On December 20, Volokholamsk was completely cleared of the enemy. By the end of December, the 9th Guards had advanced another 30 kilometers. The liberated residents of the Moscow region villages met their liberators with tears. Beloborodov ordered a portion of food from army supplies to be allocated to the most affected families. He told the soldiers, "The first major victory of Soviet troops near Moscow became possible thanks to the heroism of formations such as Beloborodov's 9th Guards Division. The Siberians, who stopped the enemy in November, now drove him west, liberating their native land. This victory had enormous strategic and moral significance. The myth of the invincibility of the German army was shattered." Afanasy Beloborodov, who received the rank of Major General in January 1942, became one of the symbols of this victory. In 1942, Afanasy Beloborodov's military career reached a new level. For his demonstrated skill in the Battle of Moscow, he was promoted to Major General, and soon thereafter followed a new appointment, commander of a rifle corps. This was an enormous responsibility and recognition of his leadership talent. The scale of the tasks changed dramatically. If previously Beloborodov commanded about 10,000 men, now he was to manage several divisions with a total strength of over 30,000 fighters. Instead of tactical decisions at the regimental and battalion level, it was necessary to think in terms of army operations. The first months in the new position were not easy. Beloborodov understood. To effectively lead the corps, he needed to restructure his command style. He could no longer, as before, personally control every unit, be present in all sectors of the battle. Now he had to trust subordinate commanders more, building a clear system of control and management. Siberian thoroughness helped Beloborodov here too. He carefully selected staff officers, personally interviewed division and regiment commanders, assessing their competence and reliability. He paid special attention to communications. Without stable control, the corps would turn into disparate units. Beloborodov participated in battles on various sectors of the Soviet-German front. His corps fought near Rzhev, where some of the bloodiest battles of the war took place. It was here that the general finally formed his approach to conducting offensive operations. Beloborodov told his commanders he was an opponent of frontal assaults on fortified enemy positions. Instead, the general sought out weak points in the German defenses, concentrated forces on narrow breakthrough sectors, and actively used flanking maneuvers. Beloborodov paid special attention to the interaction of different branches of service. Infantry, artillery, tanks, sappers, all had to act as a single mechanism. The general often conducted joint exercises, achieving coordination in the actions of all units. In 1943, Beloborodov's corps took part in the Battle of Kursk. Here, his talent as an organizer of defense was fully revealed. The corps' positions were transformed into an impregnable fortress with a multi-layered fire system, anti-tank areas, and false targets that distracted the enemy. Beloborodov's military skill did not go unnoticed. The command noted his ability to minimize losses while accomplishing combat missions. "Take care of the soldiers," he constantly reminded his subordinates. "Victory, paid for with excessive blood, is a defeat for the commander." In April 1944, Lieutenant General Afanasy Beloborodov received a new appointment, which was a recognition of his outstanding command qualities. He took command of the 43rd Army. This was a serious promotion, as now several rifle corps, tank, artillery, and engineering units were under his command, a huge military machine requiring masterful control. Beloborodov took over the army on the eve of the grand Operation Bagration, a strategic offensive by Soviet troops in Belarus. The 43rd Army was to play an important role in the liberation of Vitebsk, a powerful German defense hub, which they had turned into an impregnable fortress. First, Beloborodov toured all units, met with corps and division commanders, and assessed the state of the troops. He was interested in everything, from the morale of the soldiers to the condition of the artillery and logistical support. The new army commander paid special attention to intelligence. "Without accurate data on the enemy, we are blind," he told intelligence officers. By his order, a special reconnaissance group was created which obtained information about German defenses by penetrating deep into enemy territory. In planning the Vitebsk operation, Beloborodov proved himself a master of military art. He developed a breakthrough scheme based on concentrating forces on a narrow front section. "Don't spread the blow thinly," he instructed corps commanders, "Strike with a fist, not an open palm." The artillery preparation was planned with Siberian thoroughness. Beloborodov demanded not just to unleash tons of metal on enemy positions, but to destroy specific targets: command posts, communication nodes, artillery batteries. On June 23, 1944, Operation Bagration began. After a powerful artillery barrage, the troops of the 43rd Army went on the offensive. Beloborodov was at the forward command post, from where he personally directed the actions of the units. When the Germans tried to stop the breakthrough with a tank counterattack, the Army commander quickly redirected artillery fire and brought an anti-tank reserve into battle. The maneuver succeeded. The enemy counterattack choked. A characteristic feature of Beloborodov's command style was his ability to organize the interaction of various branches of the armed forces. Infantry, tanks, artillery, aviation, all acted as a single mechanism. This allowed for success with minimal losses. By June 25th, the troops of the 43rd Army reached the approaches to Vitebsk. The city was surrounded, and the German garrison found itself in a cauldron. Beloborodov ordered not to storm the city head-on, but to methodically dismember the encircled group into parts and destroy them piecemeal. On June 27th, Vitebsk was completely liberated. The 43rd Army captured thousands of prisoners and huge trophies. For this operation, Beloborodov was awarded the Order of Suvorov First Class. After the liberation of Vitebsk, the 43rd Army continued its offensive westward. Beloborodov masterfully organized the pursuit of the retreating enemy. Forward detachments on tanks and armored personnel carriers overtook German columns, intercepted their escape routes, and held them until the main forces arrived. This allowed for the capture of entire enemy units. The autumn of 1944 opened a new page in the combat biography of General Beloborodov. After the successful completion of Operation Bagration, the 43rd Army under his command received orders to advance in the Baltic direction. The task was not easy: to break through the enemy's powerful defenses, reach the Baltic Sea, and cut off the German forces in Courland. Beloborodov meticulously prepared for the operation. He understood that the conditions in the Baltic region differed significantly from those in Belarus. Here, there were more forests, lakes, and swamps, which complicated the maneuver of large formations. "The terrain dictates tactics," the army commander told his subordinates, demanding a detailed study of maps and reconnaissance. On October 5, 1944, the troops of the 43rd Army launched an offensive in the Memel direction. The enemy had established deeply echeloned defenses here, with reinforced concrete bunkers, anti-tank ditches, and minefields. A distinctive feature of the German defense was the skillful use of water obstacles, rivers, and lakes. Beloborodov employed an unconventional solution. Instead of a frontal assault on the fortifications, he concentrated his main forces on a narrow sector and delivered a powerful blow at the junction of two German divisions. The breakthrough succeeded. The army's advanced units penetrated the enemy's defenses to a depth of up to 15 kilometers. The German command urgently transferred reserves to eliminate the breakthrough. Fierce battles ensued. Beloborodov personally went to the threatened sector and organized the repulse of enemy counterattacks. He skillfully maneuvered artillery, transferring it to the directions of the enemy's main thrusts. An especially difficult task was overcoming the fortified area of Memel, a system of long-term defensive structures covering the approaches to the Baltic Sea. Here, Beloborodov proved himself a master of military engineering. By his order, special assault groups were created, equipped with flamethrowers, explosives, and smoke grenades to combat the bunkers. On October 22nd, The advanced units of the 43rd Army reached the Baltic Sea coast north of Memel, Klaipėda. This was a historic moment. Soviet troops cut through the German Army Group North, isolating a large enemy grouping in Courland from Germany. Beloborodov immediately organized the defense of the achieved line. He understood that the Germans would make desperate attempts to de-block the encircled troops. The army commander personally visited all divisions, checking their readiness to repel possible enemy counterattacks. During the Baltic operation, Beloborodov's particular command style became vividly apparent. A combination of decisiveness in attack with meticulous preparation for each stage of the operation. He did not throw troops into attack without sufficient artillery support and intelligence. "Every drop of a soldier's blood must be justified," the general said. January 1945. The 43rd Army, under the command of Lieutenant General Beloborodov, was preparing for a decisive thrust into the enemy's lair, East Prussia. This German territory had been transformed into an impregnable fortress with powerful defensive structures, built even before the war and strengthened during its course. Beloborodov understood. Ahead lay the most challenging task of his military career. The army commander gathered all corps and division commanders for a meeting. Quote, he warned his subordinates. Beloborodov personally studied the system of German fortifications and developed a breakthrough plan based on thorough reconnaissance and the concentration of forces in narrow sectors. On January 13, 1945, the East Prussian offensive began. After a powerful artillery barrage, the troops of the 43rd Army went on the offensive. The enemy offered fierce resistance. Every populated area, every height, became a hotbed of bitter struggle. Beloborodov introduced a new tactical approach: the creation of special assault groups to combat fortified enemy strongholds. These groups included riflemen, sappers, flamethrower operators, and artillerymen with direct fire guns. Each group received a specific task to destroy a particular objective. This allowed them to methodically at the German defenses without dispersing forces. Overcoming water obstacles became a particularly difficult task. East Prussia was crisscrossed by numerous rivers and canals, which the Germans skillfully used in their defense. Here, Beloborodov applied another innovation: the creation of advanced detachments on amphibious vehicles, which seized bridgeheads on the opposite bank before the main forces arrived. During urban assaults, the army commander used the quote, two tactic, encircling the city from the flanks while simultaneously pinning down the garrison with frontal actions. When the enemy's escape routes were cut off, Beloborodov offered the garrison surrender to avoid unnecessary casualties on both sides and preserve the city's infrastructure. By the end of January, the troops of the 43rd Army, overcoming fierce enemy resistance, had advanced 50 kilometers deep into East Prussia. Ahead lay Königsberg, the main German citadel in the east, a fortress city whose assault would become one of the most complex operations of the final stage of the war. April of 1945. Königsberg, an ancient Prussian stronghold transformed by the Hitlerites into an impregnable fortress, bristled with thousands of guns. The city was encircled by 3 defensive rings with 15 forts, numerous pillboxes, and bunkers. Every quarter was ready for prolonged defense. The garrison numbered over 100,000 soldiers and officers who had received Hitler's order. General Beloborodov, commander of the 43rd Army, had been preparing for this assault for a month. He understood. A frontal attack would lead to enormous losses. An unconventional approach was needed, Afanasy Beloborodov said at the military council. Beloborodov developed a detailed plan in which each unit was assigned a specific role. Special attention was paid to engineering preparation. By his order, special assault groups were created, 20 to 30 men each. Each included riflemen, sappers, flamethrower operators, signalmen, and artillerymen with direct-fire guns. These groups trained at specially constructed proving grounds, simulating urban development. The artillery support for the assault was organized with Siberian thoroughness. Beloborodov insisted on an unprecedented concentration of guns, up to 300 barrels per kilometer of front. Each artillery crew was assigned specific targets: pillboxes, observation posts, communication hubs. On April 6, 1945, at 5 in the morning, more than 1,500 guns and mortars opened fire on Königsberg's fortifications. The earth trembled from the explosions. Following the artillery, aviation entered the fray. Hundreds of bombers unleashed a deadly payload on the enemy's defensive structures. Beloborodov was at an observation post, from where he directed the actions of the assault groups. When the first units broke into the city, he moved the command post closer to the front line to better control the course of the battle. He transmitted via radio to the commanders. The Germans resisted desperately. Every house became a fortress. But Beloborodov's assault groups methodically advanced, employing refined tactics. Artillery destroyed fortifications, sappers made passages, assault groups burst inside and eliminated the enemy. By the end of the third day of the assault, the troops of the 43rd Army had broken through to the city center. Beloborodov decided to offer the German garrison capitulation to avoid further bloodshed. Parliamentarians with a white flag were sent to the command of the German forces. On April 9th, the remnants of the Königsberg garrison laid down their arms. In 4 days of assault, a fortress that the Germans had planned to defend for months was taken. This was a brilliant victory, embodying all the military mastery of General Beloborodov, from meticulous planning to lightning-fast execution. In May of '45, when the banner of victory was already flying over the Reichstag, General Beloborodov received an unexpected order to urgently fly to Moscow. Victory over Germany had been achieved, but the war for the experienced army commander was not yet over. At the headquarters of the Supreme High Command, he was informed of a new appointment to the Far East, where he was to prepare for war with Japan. Beloborodov arrived in Primoria in early June. Here, in the places where his military service once began, he was to lead the First Far Eastern Front. The task was not an easy one: to defeat the Kwantung Army, which was considered the elite of the Japanese armed forces. "We will fight in completely different conditions than in Europe," Beloborodov told his commanders. "Here is different terrain, a different enemy, different tactics." He organized intensive troop training, taking into account the specifics of the Far Eastern theater of operations: mountains, taiga, swamps. On August 8, '45, the USSR declared war on Japan. On August 9th, troops under Beloborodov's command crossed the Manchurian border. A lightning-fast operation began, which was destined to enter military textbooks as an example of a swift offensive in the most difficult conditions. The Kwantung Army, despite its numerical strength and armament, was unprepared for such a turn of events. Beloborodov employed the tactic of deep raids by mobile detachments, which rapidly advanced, bypassing strongholds of resistance and disrupting the enemy's command and control system. "Don't let them come to their senses," the army commander demanded of his subordinates. "Speed and surprise are our main weapons." The advanced units of the First Far Eastern Front covered 50 to 60 kilometers a day. The Japanese tried to organize defenses on pre-prepared lines, but each time they found that Soviet troops were already in their rear. In just 2 weeks, the Kwantung Army was defeated. On September 2nd, Japan signed the Act of Unconditional Surrender. World War II ended. Thus ended the combat path of General Beloborodov, from the fields near Moscow to the Manchurian plains. He went through the entire war from the first to the last day, from defense to victorious offensive. What accounted for the success of the Siberian army commander? First and foremost, his unique command style. Beloborodov always meticulously planned operations but was ready for improvisation. He spared his soldiers but demanded their full commitment. He was strict but fair. These qualities earned him the respect and love of his subordinates. During the war years, Beloborodov rose from colonel to colonel general, from division commander to front commander. His chest was adorned with 2 orders of Lenin, 4 orders of the Red Banner, 2 orders of Suvorov First Class, and the orders of Kutuzov and Bogdan Khmelnytsky. And in '44, he was awarded the highest honor, the title of Hero of the Soviet Union. The end of the war opened a new chapter in the life of General Beloborodov. The combat army commander who had traversed the path from Moscow to Königsberg and Manchuria now had to apply his experience in peacetime. In 1946, Afanasy Beloborodov was appointed commander of the troops of the East Siberian Military District. It was symbolic that a Siberian returned to his native land as an already renowned military leader. In his new post, Beloborodov launched extensive work to generalize the combat experience of the war. He understood that lessons paid for with blood should not be forgotten. At his initiative, conferences and seminars were held for officers, where key operations of the past war were meticulously analyzed. Special attention was paid to the training of young commanders, who were to become the foundation of the post-war army. An officer must always learn, Beloborodov would say at meetings with military academy graduates. War does not forgive amateurism and complacency. In the 50s, the general commanded the Far Eastern, then the Carpathian military districts. During this period, another facet of his talent emerged: the ability to foresee the development of military affairs. Beloborodov was among the first to realize the need to adapt the army to the conditions of possible nuclear weapon use. At his initiative, exercises were conducted to practice troop actions in new conditions. In 1963, Afanasy Beloborodov was appointed to a high post in the central apparatus of the Ministry of Defense. Here, his talent as a military analyst and strategist fully unfolded. Beloborodov participated in the development of new regulations and manuals, incorporating into them the invaluable experience of a frontline soldier. A special contribution of the general to military science was his literary activity. Beloborodov wrote several books of memoirs, among which Always in Combat and Military Feat hold a special place. These are not just memoirs, they are a deep analysis of military art, reflections on the nature of a commander's talent, and on the relationships between a superior and subordinates. In his books, Beloborodov devoted much attention to ordinary soldiers, those who bore the brunt of the war on their shoulders. He recalled many fighters of his division by name, told about their exploits, preserving the memory of heroes for future generations. Until his last days, Army General Beloborodov remained in service. He met with young people, spoke at military academies, and shared his experience with new generations of defenders of the fatherland. He was called quote, a man whose life became part of the country's history. Afanasy Beloborodov passed away in 1990, leaving behind a rich legacy, not only military, but also human. His books continue to serve as a textbook of military art and a school of patriotism for new generations of officers. The legacy of General Beloborodov extends far beyond military victories. His tactical thinking, command style, and approach to military affairs are studied in military academies to this day. What, then, was the secret of the Siberian bogатыр's military talent? First and foremost, it was an astonishing combination of decisiveness and prudence. Beloborodov never threw soldiers into battle without thorough preparation. These words became his life's credo. He planned operations to minimize losses and achieve maximum results. A distinctive feature of Beloborodov's tactics was his skillful use of terrain and weather conditions. In the defense of Moscow, he masterfully employed a system of strongholds capable of circular defense. When storming cities, he created specialized assault groups with clear role assignments. Beloborodov always found unconventional solutions where others saw only a frontal assault. The memory of the outstanding commander is carefully preserved in modern Russia. In Moscow, a street in the Matino district is named after him. In his native Irkutsk region, schools, streets, and squares bear Beloborodov's name. A memorial complex has been established in the village of Baklashi, where he was born. Annually, military sports competitions are held in the name of the two-time hero of the Soviet Union. In 2003, for the centennial of the commander's birth, a commemorative coin was issued. Documentaries and books tell of his military path. But Beloborodov's most important legacy is his human qualities, which remain an example for new generations of defenders of the fatherland. Courage without bravado, demandingness without cruelty, care for subordinates without familiarity. This is what distinguished the general's command style. He never demanded from soldiers what he could not do himself. In the most difficult moments of battle, Beloborodov was where it was hardest, inspiring soldiers by personal example. Today, as the world becomes increasingly unstable, Beloborodov's military art gains new relevance. His ability to find asymmetric answers to a superior enemy force, his capacity to use available resources as effectively as possible, his strategic thinking, all of this is in demand in modern conditions. For young officers, the life path of the Siberian bogatyr is a vivid lesson in how a simple peasant boy, through hard work, perseverance, and talent, reached the heights of military art. Beloborodov's story proves, a true commander is born not from privilege and connections, but from character, knowledge, and love for the motherland. Afanasy Beloborodov is not just a name in history textbooks. He is a symbol of unyielding Siberian character, military talent, and devotion to his people. His legacy continues to live in the traditions of the Russian army, in the memory of grateful descendants, and in the peaceful sky over the country he defended from the first to the last day of the most terrible war of the 20th century.